Good evening and welcome to Counterpulse. My name is Jessica Robinson Love. I'm the Executive and Artistic Director here, and I'm so glad that you all have joined us for Dance Discourse Project number 10, Are We Trapped in a Static Presenting Model? So I think we all are excited to get to the conversation, but before we do, just a little bit of background. The Dance Discourse Project is an initiative that was created by Mary Armentrout. She signed me on to be her co-conspirator. And it's basically an attempt that we've been making for the last several years to get beyond I liked it, I didn't like it, and have some meaningful conversation about what we're doing as practitioners in the dance community in the Bay Area. So we've talked about a lot of different topics, from what makes Bay Area dance unique, to site-specific work, to dancing in a post-multiculturalism landscape, to dance and YouTube and multimedia. They've been great conversations, and you can actually listen to all of them on the Counterpulse website and the Dancers Group website. And also if you know people who missed tonight's conversation, they can listen to this as well. So it's a program co-produced by Dancers Group and Counterpulse. And having said that, I will turn it over to my co-conspirator, Mary Armentrout.
Thank you. And let's see, I just want to jump in and give you guys all a little more bearing for this Dance Discourse project number 10, so you have some thoughts to have in your head as you listen to this kind of amazing array of panelists that we have somehow managed to corral for you today. So I just want to give you a little bit of introduction or a way to start your thoughts flowing. So the title of this DDP is Are We Trapped in a Static Presenting Model? Sounds kind of heavy to me already. And as you may have gleaned from the short description of this event that we've been sending around, this DDP is training its lens on this habit that we have of presenting our dance works at 8 p.m. on weekend evenings and asking if this is a good idea, the best idea, or perhaps just one of many ideas for how dance could be presented. And so we really kind of want to take a look at, why is it that we do it this way? How else could we be doing it? Why might we want to change? Those are some of the questions on the dock for tonight. As the blurb says, much of contemporary dance in the Bay Area continues to be presented Thursday through Saturday at 8 p.m. in traditional venues, following the patterns of many other performance art forms. Distance is often created between serious contemporary forms and popular forms. And the underlying assumption is that to be considered legitimate, whatever that word might mean, a work must have certain presentational aspects, be associated with certain venues, and subscribe to particular codes of relating to the audience. However, much of the exciting work in contemporary dance of the last 10 years explodes this model and questions whether it helps or hinders the evolution of the dance form. At the same time, much of the work that doesn't fall into this proscenium stage at 8 p.m. model struggles to find its path to legitimacy, if that means funding, reviews, and/or presenters. So tonight, Jessica and I are going to talk with Wayne Hazard of Dancers Group, Joel Barakel-Chan of YBCA, or Yerba Buena Center for the Arts, Ron Reagan of the Hewlett Foundation, Vanessa Camarena-Arredondo, and Micah Sigourney, which happens to be a very diverse group of artists, funders, curators, presenters, and writers, and all of them are usually more than one. So we're all together going to try and explore this question with you guys' help of, is the 8 p.m. proscenium model path to legitimacy still relevant for us now, here? And if so, why?
So we decided to have this conversation now, in part because our current artists in residence at Counterpulse, Keegan Marling, who is in the back over there, and Eric Cooper's Dandelion Dance Theater are doing their best to make this not feel like a theater. So if you come to their performance in a few weeks, you will see them performing on the risers, an audience on the stage, and a sort of complete breakdown of the relationship between the audience, or the expected relationship between the audience and the performer. So that gave us some food to have this conversation this evening. And then also I just wanted to call in the fact that I see this conversation happening in a lot of different ways in the Bay Area. So for instance, Philip Wong's Home Theater Festival, the Red Poppy Art House and the work that they're doing with Mission Performing Arts, Jorge de Hoyos and a bunch of the folks who are organizing these interventions on public transportation, the long-term site-specific work that Joanna Highgood and Joe Kreider and Kim Epifano and others have been doing. the interesting cross-pollination that's happening with the drag community and the contemporary dance community, which I feel like is happening more and more these days, and also new experiments in MP3 performance and crowdsourced art. So there's a lot going on that we can talk about. And we've gathered together a group of people who I am particularly excited about, the smart people here and the smart people there. So I'm just going to say briefly the hats that these people wear in multiple capacities. So we're going to start with Vanessa Camarena-Arredondo, who's a vocalist with Las Bomberas de la Bahia, an ensemble that performs and upholds the Afro-Puerto Rican tradition of bomba. She recently completed a fellowship in the Arts and Culture program at the San Francisco Foundation. She has experience as being a funder as well. Micah Sigourney is a performance artist and curator. He has an extensive background in physical theater and now performs under the drag name Vivienne Forevermore and hosts Something, a weekly drag art dance party. And he's also performing and collaborating with Keegan Marling as an artist in residence at Counterpulse right now. Wayne Hazard is the executive director and co-founder of Dancers Group. He's had a 20-year career as a dancer for many of the Bay Area's most exciting companies and is a powerful advocate for dance. Joelle Barakiel-Tan is the director of community engagement at Yerba Buena Center for the Arts and is an award-winning editor, writer, and visual artist. And Ron Reagan is a performing arts program officer at the William and Flora Hewlett Foundation. He's a vocalist, composer, and poet, and is working on his first collection of poems, and I found out this evening, also just won a Grammy. So you'll have to ask him about that later. One of the things I'm most excited about, as you can see, each of our panelists is a working artist as well as their role as a presenter, funder, organizer. And that'll bring a richness to the conversation, I think. So just a little housekeeping before we get started. I'm going to ask, what we're going to do first is hear about 5 to 8 minutes from each panelist, including some quick video clips. Then Mary and I will sort of start a conversation, and then we'll open the conversation up to you all. So be thinking now about questions, reactions, comments, ideas, instigations that you might have for us. And when we do pass it on to that time, I just want to let you all know and remind us as a panelist that we are recording this for podcast. So please use a microphone. Did I leave anything out, Mary?
Did great.
Okay. Vanessa, would you like to start us off?
Sure.
Can you hear me? Yeah.
What I want to do first is show you some clips of the group that I perform with, and also show you some clips of some work, some bomba being done in Chicago, which is presented differently. So let's run the clips first, if you wouldn't mind. Thank you so much. So this first one is at a house in Chicago where there's a large Puerto Rican community, and bomba is traditionally Puerto Rican. And so they actually have a home that's a cultural space where it's presented on weekends. Oh, we're actually going to see bomberas first, excuse me. We're going to see just some footage of the local group that I perform with, Las Bomberas de la Bahia, performing at Guerrilla Cafe in the East Bay in Berkeley, and also at the Queer Women of Color Film Festival at Brava Theater.
There's different schools of thought. But this is, 2009, and our interpretation of this tradition and claiming the space as an all-female collective, because bomba primarily has been played historically by men on the drums and then women sing and dance. And so we wanted to create space in the Bay Area, and so we've been together for almost 2 years now, and just making sure bomba stays alive in the Bay Area. Thank you.
Well, there was a little bit more, but that's fine. That was just us. The second one was us performing at Brava. But let's look at this. This is fun. So this is a group called Buya, and the people that you see playing are both in the group Buya and also our community members. We have two teachers from Puerto Rico in the back. And the reason I chose to show this piece is just because essentially that's kind of how people learn bomba, the way you see the little girl kind of participating with one of the leading dancers here in the US, really. Her name is Ibelis Diaz, and That's kind of like how it starts. If you think about a stage, this is an Sunday afternoon, and the players that you see, some are in performing ensembles and others just kind of show up. All right, that's good, thank you. So what Bomberas is doing here, we're performing in the diaspora, so the music is a tradition that was started during the time of the slaves, really, and it's a music of resistance, and people would perform certain songs to kind of deliver messages and spread messages throughout the community, and then other times it was just to dance and have fun. And as our director said, Denise Solis, in that one clip, we weren't all there, so it's a history, it's an oral tradition that we're all kind of trying to understand. I myself aren't of Puerto Rican or Black heritage, so there's some controversy that comes to presenting, that arises with us presenting work in the Bay Area, and specifically this work where there's not a large Puerto Rican community as there is in Chicago and New York. But what we do is more and more being called urban bomba. So essentially it's performing a traditional form in an urban setting, and what does that mean to the tradition, to kind of upholding the tradition, and to also expanding kind of venues where it can be presented, and people who can perform it. Which there's a lot of controversy. There's a lot of controversy around because of issues of appropriation and people who are not Puerto Rican performing the music, and also how to learn in the diaspora is challenging. So, for example, this weekend we're bringing 2 teachers in from Puerto Rico to kind of like to work both to offer public workshops, but really to work intensively with the group, because there are 2 teachers here in the Bay Area, but we don't perform as part of that ensemble. So there's some challenges around how we learn bomba, a lot of which is through YouTube and some through Skype, and then our visits to Puerto Rico. And that's just some background on the group. But essentially, the way that we look at creating audio, we perform in different places. We perform in parks, in backyards, a lot in homes. Bomba can just kind of like happen in a lot of different spaces. There doesn't necessarily need to be a set performance in order for it to kind of happen. So it kind of operates outside of the Thursday through Sunday 8 p.m. model, but then we also do present in those forums. But we're also kind of really alive in the club scene, which makes it challenging to present traditional work where there's actually a history tied to it, and we will stop in the middle of songs and kind of explain the history of the work, and people are open to it for the most part, and I think that loans some heart to the form. But I think that, at the end of the day, people want to be moved and they want to dance when they're in a club setting. But a lot of the way that the way our stages have been created is been what meaning we bring to people in the community. So for example, the second clip was going to show a little bit of the Queer Women of Color Film Festival. So there's different people, different audiences, the queer community, a lot of, there's a women's kind of like a women's festival or conference that happens in Richmond, California, which is kind of isolated performance venues. So we'll kind of show up to do performances in elementary schools and after school and on the weekends, where there's kind of like mixed audiences, where there's like parents and grandmothers and children in the space. And so our audience can sometimes define the spaces that we perform in. And I think, that I don't think that that's new. I think that that's, but it's the way that we kind of show up in community. So, and I think part of the tradition of bomba is because it's very small. It's small-ish, it's big to us, but it's, but is how it regenerates itself, how students become practitioners, and because it's, as you saw, it's it's a participatory form of music or a tradition. So it's really important that in order for the tradition to live and to survive, that people learn. And that people, so then how do you engage? We have to think about how we engage, a novice artist or practitioner, which many of us are actually. We kind of started and learned within the group. But that's where the tension comes around. Well, if you're doing bomba in California, where there's not a large Puerto Rican community, how do you like generate more bomba artists? And then a Mexican's going to show up at some point. And so I showed up, and so did our practitioner, one of our directors. And so to this question of legitimacy and how venues kind of legitimize performance, I consider bomba to be part of like a fringe folk culture. And Micah and I were kind of speaking about how, I feel like, drag and bomba, it's kind of like happening over here. And sometimes it kind of makes it to this main stage. We just did the Ethnic Dance Festival last year, which was really great. But even that's kind of fringy, you know what I mean, to a certain degree. And it depends on like what you consider to be the mainstream, because to some people the mainstream, it doesn't come on the map. It's not, so is the ballet mainstream? Or in a Latino immigrant community, the ballet isn't mainstream. Mariachi is mainstream, or so. But thinking about like traditional stages, I feel like in some ways bomba falls out of the mainstream, because our audiences, we really draw from clubs in our audiences, and to build our audiences. So the bomba itself, and as a practitioner, we're really legitimized by people within the tradition mostly. And I suppose, like as a performer, there's times when it's really actually, it really is legitimizing to perform at the Ethnic Dance Festival, and that was or when we performed in New York at this thing called Bon Plenazo, but that was very specifically for the bomba en plena community. But as far as like where we feel like we're really creating strong work, one is a space like the Ethnic Dance Festival, and another is mostly it's through other bomba practitioners really feeling like the work resonates with them, and that we're really representing the tradition well, and both as musicians and just as culture bearers. So that's kind of where our legitimacy comes from, but that's not always helpful. In a place like California, thankfully we have a lot of enlightened funders, I would say. So they see everything, and when I was a funder, I tried to see everything, as a creative expression, and I think that I would want to move away from like, oh, there's traditional and then there's ballet. It's like no, there's both in this space, and how do we honor and elevate both? But the challenge of performing bomba is that sometimes people don't always understand your form. So they don't understand, well, what's quality, what's not quality, what is your group legitimate because they have, so what are the markers to indicating whether it's like legitimate or not? That we have an audience, that people want to come through. Is that audience Puerto Rican? Is that audience Mexican? Are we not even concerned with the color or the ethnicity of the audience? I think, sometimes, or if you think about applying to for a grant, who's on the panel and how are they going to understand your work? I mean, that's like a real issue. And again, thankfully, California has a lot of enlightened funders, so it's not always a huge concern, but I think one of the concerns that's come up for us is how we're viewed as composers, and I think that I haven't really, I think I'll stop there for now, but it's just, so that's a conversation that we need to have with ourselves as a group, and also engage people who are funding in that realm.
Thank you so much, Vanessa.